Meeting is recorded. Continue. Thank you very much. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Mary Ellen Miller. I am the chair of the League of Women Voters Upper Mississippi River Region Interleague Organization. We call it UMR affectionately. We focus on water quality issues, sustainability, and climate change through working together with 4 Upper Mississippi River Region states, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Illinois. A very dynamic group now going into its 6th year with these issues. I want to welcome everyone to our program and remind you that it is being recorded, and that if you would like to share this with your local leagues or other organizations that you think might be interested in this topic of sustainable cities, that link will be available on our website. We welcome Gina. I'm sorry. Can't see everybody here.
Oh, Gina Bell.
Gina Bell, thank you very much to our program. I just want to preface this afternoon, as more people are coming on, by saying I'm really personally very excited about this. In my previous work, I spent a lot of time in Dubuque over the last many decades, starting in the 70s. And at that time, I can recall Dubuque as being a dusty, old, musty river town. And just not one that I looked forward to going to. But over the decades, I began to see major transformations in the community, an interest in making the downtown area more accessible and vital, doing something with the riverfront, which was heavy industry for many, many years, and now is a wonderful, wonderful place to experience a museum, what is it called, Tam, a saltwater? Is it a saltwater museum?
Oh, National Mississippi River Museum and Aquarium.
And is it saltwater or is it freshwater?
No, freshwater.
Freshwater. And a wonderful convention center. And they have really capitalized on some of their historic buildings and elements in the community. I can tell you that the 50 years that I've been going to Dubuque has been a remarkable transformation. And what makes it unique, I think it today still is the only certified sustainable city in Iowa, and Gina can help us explore that more. But I was fascinated because UMR is focused on water quality and water quantity. And one of the things I learned a few years back, and I'm sure Gina will talk about it, is that if you live in Dubuque, you can subscribe to a metering program for your house that you will actually tell you if your 17-year-old son is spending too much time in the shower. So I'm looking forward to today's presentation and welcome you all. And I'm going to turn it over to our board member from Dubuque, Tam Prenisel, who will introduce our speaker. Tam, take it away.
Okay. Well, we appreciate Gina giving our presentation today. Gina graduated in 2000 with her BA in International Studies and Spanish from Pacific University in Portland, Oregon. From 2000 to 2002, she was with the Peace Corps in Paraguay. From 2002 to 2006, she actually worked for the National Mississippi River Museum and Aquarium. And then in 2006, she moved back to Portland, Oregon, where she worked for Prosper Portland and as a human resources person, and managed a 21-person staff working on organizational matters, development, and implementing fund development. In 2011, she was still in Portland and working for the Development Commission, and she facilitated community engagement efforts and as a liaison to 3 districts, and worked is a community and organizational capacity building effort. Then she began working in Forest Grove, Oregon, for a nonprofit that worked to educate and empower low-income Latina women and families in Oregon, and worked as an administrator, including data collection, data analysis, and program improvement, and managing facilitators and program volunteers. And then in October 2018, we're happy she moved back to Dubuque and began working for the city of Dubuque as the city's Sustainable Community Coordinator. She's responsible for implementing and managing Dubuque's sustainability plan based on environmental and ecological integrity, economic prosperity, and social and cultural vibrancy. So Gina, thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be speaking with all of you. As Tam mentioned, I was born and raised in Dubuque, and like Mary Ellen said, I was ready to get out in the mid-90s. I didn't really see much of a future for myself here, and so I went to Portland, I went to school, joined the Peace Corps, had many great experiences. I came back after Peace Corps and lived with my grandpa and got to help open the newly expanded, at the time, newly expanded River Museum. And after his passing, I moved back to the West Coast to sort of start my young professional career. And so some of that was with the organization called Adelante Mujeres. I worked on sustainable agriculture and worked with Latino farmers there. And then I moved to the city of Portland and worked on neighborhood economic development. And all this to say is that I'm very much a generalist. My degree is not in sustainability. I'm surrounded by young people who have their master's degree in sustainability that want to know about my job. And I really have come to this place through experience and different experiences with economic development, with social and cultural vibrancy, and with sustainability. And so that's how I came to be here. This isn't on my professional resume, but I did have 2 children while I was in Portland, and that was really the impetus for moving home, was to be able to give my kids a similar upbringing to my own, and to be closer to my parents. And so I'm happy to be here. And the one condition for moving back, I told my husband, was that I wanted a cool job, and I got this job, and so it was then sealed that we were going to move to Dubuque. So I have some slides. Hopefully they're going to advance. There we go. So as many of you may know, Dubuque is a city and the county seat of Dubuque County, Iowa. It's located right on the banks of the mighty Mississippi River. It's right where Illinois, Wisconsin, and Iowa meet. We fondly call it the tri-state area, although I know there are tri-state areas across the United States that refer to themselves as that as well. But it's interesting in that it's about 58,000 residents, but it's really the commercial and industrial and cultural and educational center for the area, because it's surrounded by very rural areas in Wisconsin, Illinois, and Iowa. It's a part of the driftless region, so it was not covered in glaciers, and so it's much less flat than many parts or many ways or many places that people might think about Iowa. And you can see my arrow, not the best, easiest map to see it on, but there's where Dubuque is. So our watershed address is located right in the heart of the Mississippi River watershed. And this is important because we recognize in Dubuque, and we hope others along in our watershed recognize that we are not alone, and that our actions have consequences to other Mississippi River cities and towns, and as well as sort of the larger area outside of that. So we want to make sure that we're good stewards. As I mentioned, this is just a picture to highlight some of the lovely bluffs that we have here. It's not flat countryside. We definitely have a different topography than a lot of Iowa. I just want to take a moment when we talk about early settlements to recognize that we're talking about European settlements, and that I am on the ancestral lands of the Meskwaki, Ho-Chunk, and Potawatomi, as well as other indigenous peoples who have stewarded the land. And So we just want to pay homage to that. And then for European settlers, it was a lot of boat building and brewing and the landscape in early Dubuque. So this was about 1833, Dubuque was founded. And so in the mid 1800s, with the introduction of European settlers in the area, lots of trees got chopped down. Our bluffs were covered traditionally in oak and abundant trees. And as boat building began and other industries started, much of the Savannah oak was taken out. And with that increased different rainflow patterns and runoff. And I don't know if you guys know very much about runoff numbers, but just to get kind of nerdy here. So pre-settlement, it was at 45, and post-urban, it's 76.7. So in those very early years, so I'm sorry, the curve runoff is about storm sewer size. And so what this tells us is that very early on, there was a big shift, and there hasn't been much since then. Even though we have continued to churn up our prairies, there's been minimal change to runoff since the early European settlement. And then a little bit of a historical perspective that was sort of touched on. So Dubuque was pretty booming in the 60s and 70s, and then with the farm crisis in the 80s, our unemployment reached about 23%, which is the highest in the nation for a while. Major manufacturers of the area laid off people or just completely closed. We created a ton of brownfields, a lot along the Mississippi River. We lost in the decade from 1980 to 1990, we lost almost 10% of our population, which has never recovered. And we had a saying that we said, well, the last one out of Dubuque, please turn off the lights. I was certainly a part of that, where I didn't see this future for myself. And so we got a new city manager, who is still our city manager, Mike Van Milligan. He came in the early 90s, and Dubuque really started to reinvent itself. And with our new mayor, he's in his last year as our mayor, Mayor Roy Buell. He came in and really pushed sustainability as this new mission for the city. He looked at what the city was already doing, purchasing these brownfields, getting EPA brownfield assessment grants and cleaning up the brownfields, redeveloping the river fund, and then focusing on tourism and job creation and sustainability. And so we flipped our script and said, hey, well, the last one out of the room, please turn off the lights. This is what we're going to focus on. So Dubuque has been named an All-American City several times. And as Mayor Buell continued on this sustainability push and started to think about his legacy, not only as mayor, but as a grandfather, he pushed to adopt a climate action plan, which we fondly call the 50% by 2030. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. So the city's vision statement is up here, but you can see that it both talks about being sustainable and resilient, as well as inclusive and equitable. We want to make sure we have a strong, diverse economy and making sure that we're connected through transportation as well as broadband. We want people to have active lifestyles, use active transportation, and have choice when they're thinking about and living in Dubuque. So the Office of Sustainability has oversight from the Resilient Community Advisory Commission. It works within the city manager's office, and the aim is to strengthen our community's resiliency through climate action. So working both internally to review and advise and promote sustainability within city operations and city buildings, as well as externally to build partnerships and support our residents' efforts and businesses' efforts to be more sustainable, while also fostering collaboration throughout the community. We're a small office. It's myself, it's one FTE and then an intern. My budget's about $228,000 a year, and we offer grants, energy audits and weatherization, climate action. We have a great conference and even more. The goal is to improve the quality of life for residents of Dubuque reduce greenhouse gas emissions, educate and empower residents to take action while providing an example of how innovation and creativity and care for creation and passion can promote sustainability. I offer a lot of community engagement sessions and try to focus my work on human beings, human-centered approach to this work, understanding that humans are the ones that created the mess that we're in, and we're also going to be the ones that have to get us out of it. So here is our model, which is not anything too ground earth-shattering, but we look at environmental integrity, economic prosperity, and social and cultural vibrancy. So we want to meet the needs of the present without compromising the needs of the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. We have a really holistic approach. We want to make Dubuque viable and livable and equitable. And we have 12 principles that sort of build up into this model. We look at, fresh, clean air, how we can reduce our greenhouse gases, water as a source of life. We have a lot of water here, but we don't know for how long, and we want to make sure that it's clean. We look at energy conservation, the built environment, wholesome local foods, and as well as engagement related to all of these efforts. So the Resilient Community Advisory Commission is really responsible for being a liaison between the community and the City Council. I staff the commission, and we have 9 members, and they have a very long purpose, which you can read about on our website. But really, they review a lot of different programs that we do. They support other city departments that want to be more sustainable by doing research or providing letters of support to council for budget requests that might seem like a little bit more expensive than sort of normal operating costs, but really consider a lot of sustainability aspects. And they started out, this commission started out as the Environmental Protection Commission, and they requested the city that they turn into the Resiliency Commission because they wanted to make sure that they were encompassing the social and cultural vibrancy aspect, the sustainability, environmental aspect, as well as the economic aspect. And so they consider all 3 of those things in their work. Another thing that our office does is the Sustainable Dubuque Grant Program. So these are twice annually grants that we provide. You can get up to $2,500. It's a great program in that you don't have to be a nonprofit. It's available to businesses, passionate residents, anyone who wants to do something that meets one of our 12 sustainability principles. We ask that there's a community engagement or a community education piece to it. And then the Resiliency Commission is the granting agency. But we've given out almost $200,000 over the past decade to improve sustainability. Lots of them go to growing local food, but we've done stuff like supporting a doula program for low-income moms who might not be able to afford a doula, or looking at events, because we think that that all builds to our city's resiliency. We support and host a Green Iowa AmeriCorps energy and community team. They work on energy efficiency throughout our community. We're always looking for new members, and we're currently recruiting. So if you know of anyone who might be interested in learning more about building performance and energy efficiency, please send them my way. But they perform weatherization and audits, as well as a variety of other community services that they participate in. And we're very lucky to have them. They've performed this year. They've done, I think, 152 energy saver kits. So instead of going into homes because of COVID-19, they had an online sort of ordering service where you could say, here's how big my windows are, it was a whole questionnaire, and then they designed a kit for your home that you could then install yourself. Pipe insulation, LED light bulbs, low flow aerators, all sorts of good stuff that they've really made a difference in energy efficiency and water saving in our community. We also host the Growing Sustainable Communities Conference each October, except for 2020 because of you know what, but it brings leaders from all over the the nation to talk about how they're growing their communities more sustainably. And it's a mixture of city officials and businesses and nonprofits and higher education groups who all are doing really cool things. And so we all get together for 2 days in October and talk about it. And I know I always walk away inspired, even though I'm running around attending to all the details. And so if you're interested in attending, you should shoot me an email or give me a call and I can tell you more about it. But it's fairly low cost conference for the caliber of keynotes that we bring in, but it's something that the mayor feels really passionate about, and so they make sure that the city supports this. So the biggest chunk of my work is to implement this 50% by 2030 Community Climate Action and Resiliency Plan. And you can imagine that as one person, this is no easy task. But both sustainability and resiliency are named in our vision and mission statements. They've been a part of our council's goal setting priorities for more than a decade. And while this can feel overwhelming and all encompassing, at its most basic, sustainability in city government operations is looking at existing policies and procedures and then making it work towards efficiency. It helps when there are co-benefits of economic growth, and environmental protection, but really we want to make sure that our residents are getting a good value and that they're going to be safe, and we're going to keep the environment clean for them. So a climate action plan are just strategies that help us mitigate climate change and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So we want to do our fair share. We recognize that if we meet our goal or go beyond our goal, it's not going to change things for the entire world, but if everyone is doing their part, we certainly can change things. So our 50% by 2030 plan is broader in scope than just reducing greenhouse gases. So we want to look at the mitigation piece, which is greenhouse gas reduction, but we want to address the root causes. So reducing energy demands, increasing energy efficiency, switching to low carbon energy sources, having really efficient buildings, electrifying our city fleet, making sure that there's charging infrastructure for residents that want to purchase electric vehicles. And then we also look at adaptation. So how can we lower our risk? We know climate change is happening. We've already experienced the impacts. So how do we continue to lower our risks? So infrastructure changes, we have some examples I'll share in a bit, but using less water. Mary Ellen mentioned our smart water program. So this was an initiative before my time. I get to take a credit for a lot of things that happened before I ever got to the city, but it's fantastic. It's an app on my phone, and when my toilet is running because the seal isn't shut tight, it tells me, hey, we think you might want to check you might have a leak. And so it really has, it saved me a couple of times for sure. And I know it's saved other people as well, not only for the cost, but also because we want to make sure that we're protecting our water. We also are encouraging lots of urban agriculture within the city of Dubuque, and then making sure that outside of the city, we're working with our county partners, looking at crop diversification as best we can. We are corn country. And then our climate action plan also looks at equity. So we gathered a lot of community input, and we want, there are certain things we have to do to meet our mitigation and adaptation goals, but we want to know also how the plan will work for our residents and how we can best serve our frontline communities. And we define our frontline communities as the communities in Dubuque that will be hit first and worst because of climate change impacts. Recognizing that if we address their issues, we'll be addressing many people's issues. We had a community engagement session with folks, and we didn't talk about climate change or climate action. We just asked about daily challenges, and overwhelmingly people talked about high utility bills, housing, affordable housing, and transportation. And then my superpower is to link all of those things to our climate action plan, because our climate action plan addresses all of those things. So people don't say, oh, I'm experiencing climate change impacts, but they can tell you that they have mold growing in their house because of constant flooding. And so I put the language that they're saying, I translate it into my work and can tell council, hey, we need to support this because of this. So here's just a quick look at where we were in 2003. And then we did our greenhouse gas inventory in 2018. We saw a 27% decrease. A lot of that was grid improvements and low-hanging fruit, stuff that was easy and not super expensive for the city to do. So the next 9 years will be the challenge of actually putting a lot of money forward on this and really committing to meet our 50% goal. You can see the reductions by sectors. We have solid waste and recycling, transportation and land use, as well as buildings and energy. But we also we've recognized a lot of savings that we can have. And so we make sure that we tell council, well, you're gonna have to spend some money, you also get to save a lot of money. And I think if we're looking at positives of COVID-19, having experienced that has been really eye-opening and saying, hey, this is something that we need to address immediately, and reminding folks that climate change is also happening and it's an emergency and we need to address it, and putting it in those terms and saying, hey, you know, there's a potential for increased COVID-19 type scenarios if we don't address our climate issues, has also been a really compelling message for our council. So we also do resiliency and adaptation planning, and that's because Dubuque likes to flood, like many towns along the Mississippi. So this is pre-1965, as you can tell by the horse-drawn carriage, and then you can see the picture of the flood of 1965. So as the city developed, obviously people built along the river. It had to, you know, it was constantly shifting. I hope all of you have seen those beautiful ribbon maps of where the Mississippi has taken its course. But we then, after the flood of 1965, the city built the flood wall and levee system. So you can see it in the black dotted line is our flood wall and levee system, and the city has remained relatively protected because of that. We did my first year here, so 2018, winter of 2018, 2019, we had a unique situation where in the spring, so I guess it was 2019, it was still cold and frozen. The floodgates were frozen open, so we were heating the floodgates so that we could close them so that the spring flooding didn't inundate Dubuque. And I didn't even have to say anything in my meetings. I just was like, look at what's happening, this climate chaos. But so this system was completed in 1970. It's aging, but we also recognize that we're very lucky to have it. But then looking at climate trends, there's going to be an increase in precipitation. You can see, so this on the left-hand side, it's from 83 to 2018, and then it's looking forward over the next 80 years, what we can expect to see. But in general, Iowa and the Midwest are going to see increased precipitation, but then interestingly enough, also drought. Over the last 122 years in Iowa, there's been about a 15% increase in annual precipitation. And I guess the overall theme is that there are averages, but then there are also extreme weather events when large amounts of rain will come. And so those types of storms are then a whole different response. And as I said, earlier, we cut down all the trees on the bluff, and we've developed a bunch of farmland into parking lots for big box stores and movie theaters. And we've built a flood wall. So we've sort of created this cup in Dubuque. So we're very prone to flash flooding. And this next map will sort of show our flood hazard. So there's a lot of flood hazard along the Mississippi, but then inland as well because of flash flood. And that the warmer atmosphere allows clouds to store more water and precipitation. So we can see bigger storm events, and that can be in Dubuque. You can see in this photo a major problem. because of this cup that we've built. There's water coming down the bluff as fast as it can, trying to get to the river. And we have a low-lying flat area. It's where it's an area of concentrated poverty in the city as well. And this is oftentimes where our flash flooding occurs. I don't have a video in here, but we did have a fairly recent storm, well, in the last couple of years since I've been here, where we were doing construction as a part of the Bee Branch flood project. And a construction dumpster got picked up in the water and floated into the hole they were digging to put the pipe in. So that was just an added mess to deal with. Oh, sorry. Did I skip ahead too far? Oh, well, this is my good news of more inland flooding by 2050. I think I've covered that point fairly solidly. So here is our lovely Bee Branch Watershed Flood Mitigation Project. It directly addresses the effects of climate change on our city. It focused on managing the increasingly intense rainstorms, the resulting flash flooding, the damages to homes and buildings caused by too much water arriving in the same place at the same time. So this creek that you're seeing was buried underground. It was a storm sewer for 100 years, and Dubuque in about 2010, it's been a long project, started looking at funding to daylight the creek. And so they removed almost a mile of the buried storm sewer. And this creek, you can see, is very much well within its banks, but when we do get a heavy rain event, it is designed to then fill up and then slowly recede as the water can be let in through detention basins to the river. So this green area is the Bee Branch watershed. And because of many flood damage and flood experiences and disaster declarations, presidential disaster declarations, the city said, hey, we have to do something about this. At one point, there was a story where there was a tornado happening. Tornado sirens are going off. Folks were told to go into their basements, but there was also flash flooding and basements were filling. And so people were sort of trapped in this area of, where do I choose to go to safety? Do I go into the flooded basement to survive the tornado, or do I stay above ground and not drown? And it was just too much of a mess, and the city said, we have to address this. And the Bee Branch Watershed Project is how we are addressing this. It represents about 25% of the city live in the Bee Branch area, and over half live or work in that area. And so we estimate that the businesses in the Bee Branch watershed produce over $500 million in annual sales. So that's certainly something that we want to be protecting. So here are our storm weather events, these heavy rains producing flash flooding, and here are some of the examples of the high water. Something really beautiful about, you can see the damage to hot water heaters and heaters. And so one of the really cool projects out of the Bee Branch watershed flood mitigation project is that, yes, we daylighted the creek and we addressed sort of the flash flooding, but then there's the Bee Branch Healthy Homes component, where the city has gone in and helped people put up on cinder blocks, heaters and hot water heaters, purchased new hot water heaters and heaters using a variety of different federal grants and foundation grants, and then making sure that the gutters are right sized and pointed away from limestone foundations. And so it's really been a holistic approach. It hasn't just been about the engineering feat of the Bee Branch. So the overall goals of this project have been to reduce the volume of stormwater, slow the rate and timing through detention basins, through the daylighted creek, as well as through some other things such as green alleyways. So to reduce the volume of floodwaters, the city is in the process of converting streets and alleys from impervious surfaces to pervious pavement that will help slow floodwaters. And so we have used federal funding to do this, and it is an ongoing process. There's a maintenance part to it, but every budget cycle, we try to put in more money to convert additional green alleyways to continue to slow flood and high precipitation. So you can see here, hopefully, so the blue on the right-hand side is the Mississippi River. And so we have a detention basin up the hill, up the bluff, and then it comes down sort of following Kaufman Avenue, and then it will eventually hit the B branch, and then it goes to the 16th Street detention basin, and then eventually into the river. So the idea is that we're slowing it, and you can see this is the B branch. In another look, that was where the sewer was, and then the blue parts are where the creek was daylighted. And then here are just some other examples of what it looked like. So instead of just a bunch of pavement, we have this lovely creek, daylighted creek. Here again, you can see the underground storm sewer and then what the creek looks like now. But we recognize that this is one example of things we can do. It was about $262 million. So that's not something the city of Dubuque can do overnight, but we also have to keep working on this. So we are also looking at other resiliency and sustainability efforts, such as solar power for energy independence. This is our array on our public works building. So we are helping to reduce our energy use through energy efficiency measures, but then also making sure we're using renewable energy. And this, we're also working on getting battery backups for this so that in emergency operations, we can have a central location that has power, and we can make sure people are safe and that city operations can continue. Here is our solar bright field. So this is a former brownfield in Dubuque, right along the 16th Street detention basin, which you can see in the background. It's Alliant Energies, it's owned by Alliant Energy, but it was several different partnerships that came together. And currently we are working on a program called Renew DBQ, and it is a low to moderate income solar project. We are hoping that in the next probably 12 to 18 months, we can get solar installed on 10 homes in our low mod neighborhoods downtown and really give some energy independence to some low income families. This was a while ago, but we did update our Water and Resource Recovery Center. So it went from being our largest energy user in the city to our most efficient. It saved, in the first year of operations, it saved the city about $600,000. It was a $70 million project, and we continue to make upgrades to it. But most recently, our current endeavors, we're not there yet, will be to capture gas and then put it back into the pipeline, similar to what we're doing at our landfill. And so this is a fully closed circle of what we are creating here in Dubuque. But the idea is to use that methane to not only power this plant, but then to hopefully power vehicles or heat homes in the future. And then just, I had mentioned it a little bit, but Iowa's economy and Dubuque's economy is largely driven by agriculture. And most of that is corn and soybeans. And there's a lot of fertilizer going into our water. And so we want to make sure that we are addressing that issue. So Dubuque, the city of Dubuque, the county of Dubuque has a really great partnership where they are trying to reduce nutrients that are going into, not directly into the Mississippi, but into the watershed, which will lead into the Mississippi. And so it seems a little bit odd Dubuque is a fairly urban, suburban place, but we recognize that all the farmland that surrounds us, we need to address this nutrient issue. And so that's something that the city is supporting and working on. And moving forward, my work will really focus on implementing the climate action plan. I'm just taking it one step at a time because I'm one person, but I've identified 3 projects that I'll put in my budget for next year. And then hopefully we will do those 3, and then we'll do the next 3. And definitely we'll continue with community engagement efforts. The community conversation that I told you about earlier with regard to, linking climate action to people's everyday struggles was really powerful for our city council, and it put it into perspective. So it's not just this like weird sustainability thing from the lady from Portland who keeps harping about it, but it's, residents' experiences, and through climate action for something that's good for the environment and our residents, we can make a difference. And with that, I can answer any questions. I'm not sure what time it is. Yeah, I think we have time for all of that. And that's my contact information, and you can follow us on social media if you would like.
Gina, just thank you so much for this. I've got more questions than we have time for today, so I'll definitely be reaching out to you afterwards about this, but I'm just happy that we are able to showcase Dubuque and what a transformation this community has had since the 80s. Just remarkable. So the message that you share with us is it can be done, right? It takes baby steps. It takes lots of people in lots of different directions, but it can be done. And at the same time, we sometimes think that sustainable practices and resilient practices somehow take something away from us. And actually what I've seen happen in Dubuque, it has so enhanced the city. Just taking the underground sewers out and putting the watershed above ground added such a visual impact as well as just a structural impact that is just phenomenal. And so it's just wonderful to see this. So Nancy Porter asks, is there an interactive city-county group in Iowa that works together for climate? Do you have compatriots around the state?
Yeah, so the city and the county have several different partnerships that work together. Obviously, we could always be more efficient and effective, but it does also help that my husband is the urban watershed coordinator for the county. So we have lots of table discussions that aren't formal partnerships between the city and the county. But there's also, there are the cities and counties in Iowa. We have a group that we all work together, and we get together about once a quarter to talk about what we can do to move state policy and just to further our work, we share a lot of our resources, like why reinvent a request for quotes for an EV charging structure if Cedar Rapids has already done it, just saving time there. And then we have a Heartland group, which is more regional. So it's basically all of the middle states along the Mississippi that we meet monthly to kind of talk over challenges and opportunities and how we can get some of this infrastructure package money to our states and not just the coastal states. And so, yes, there are lots of different groups that I am a part of. And then I'm also a part of a national group of city and county urban sustainability professionals. And so it is a lot of really creative and smart and passionate people with different backgrounds that come together to work on these issues. And so it's always, I leave the meetings and I think I gotta do more, and then I don't know where all the time goes.
Questions from the group. Just unmute yourself, jump in here. I think we're small, so we don't need to use the chat and Q&A. Let's just, okay, Lynn.
Oh, Gina, this is Tam, and you mentioned nutrient reduction and the partnership. So the city works with the county conservation board and that staff, and I know they're working in the watersheds in the county. And so how does that impact the city?
Yeah, so it's all, you can't stop water, right? And so that's very much the idea, is that, you know, the city is investing in county efforts so that the county can slow water coming into the city and make sure that it's clean water that's coming into the city. So that's a lot of it, of how it works. It's all, they're also working with soil and water conservation. So some of it's like inspection and fines, and some of it is incentives. And so carrots and sticks of how we can improve our watershed together. You know, it's all impactful. So we want to make sure that we're doing smart development. And I mean, I don't want to lie and say that it's always like the most beautiful partnership ever. There are certainly challenges about who pays for what, but they're talking about it. So that's certainly the direction that we want to go in.
Others with comments or questions, this is your opportunity.
So I see one in the chat about the smart meters for water, and you can opt in. So if you know, there are some liability issues. So if you do have a major leak and you didn't opt in, it's harder to say like, but I didn't know, because the information is there. But it happened before I was here, so I don't know if there was major privacy issues. But I think for the most part, it's been generally well accepted, because it saved people a bunch of money from, I mean, just even like a bad seal in a toilet, if you're gone for the weekend, that's several hundred thousands of gallons of water. And so people have been really responsive, because you get a little ding on your phone, and even if you're far away, you can send someone over to turn off your water or fix your seal. So I can attest to,
yeah, I can attest to that. I had a 10,000 gallon water bill last month and discovered that not my toilet was leaking, but the line in the floor to the toilet had been leaking. And the only way I discovered it beyond getting the bill was I stepped on the floor by the toilet one day and it gave way. I mean, it was squishy. And wouldn't it be great to have had some kind of meter to let me know that? I do believe, if my memory's right, Gina, that IBM was a major supporter financially of that effort when it was put in. And are they still a major employer in Dubuque?
They're not.
They're not, okay.
No, they met their 10-year requirement and bolted, unfortunately. But they were a major player, and they did a lot of great technology upgrades for sustainability while they were here.
Jean Cheever has a question. Go ahead, Jean.
Hi, Gina. Jean Cheever, League of Women Voters in Dubuque. I noticed that equitability is one of your goals, and you had a lot of sticky notes in your planning session. Can you talk about how that fits into your major goal? How you can become equitable?
Yeah, so it's an ongoing challenge. So in my early work life, I worked with low-income Latinos, and so I'm very committed to continuing this work and recognizing that there is systemic racism built into the systems that I'm part of as city government. And so we want to be addressing those. And so part of that is being human-centered. It's not about infrastructure, it's about how this impacts people. And much of our climate action plan was built on first community engagement. So making sure that the plan was going to work for people and asking people about their daily struggles and what they needed. And so it's not perfect by any stretch, but we're the way I'm starting to implement this plan is starting with the first and worst communities, right? So the communities in Dubuque will be hit first by climate, or are currently suffering climate change impacts, and don't have maybe the financial resources to buy their way out of it. it was really disheartening. I did an early survey when I started, and it was working with a high school student who was very interested in sustainability, and she did a survey at all 3 schools and in Dubuque, 3 high schools, and when there was the income category, like for their parents' income, the higher incomes just said like, well, we'll just buy our way out of this. And lower income students were very much concerned with climate change. And so it guides my work in that we're going to focus on those communities. They're almost all in downtown Dubuque, and they have higher energy burden. So they're paying a larger percent of their monthly income on their utilities. And they're in a floodplain or a flash flood area. And so if we address their needs, I believe that we can address the larger community's needs as well. So there are specific equity considerations for each action that we have in the climate action plan. And then also just a commitment from me personally that I am using that framework as we move forward.
I have another question. You showed an interesting map of our flood wall, but are we doing anything with wetlands so that we don't have to just shoot that water downstream?
What are wetlands? No, I'm kidding. Not enough is the answer that I would give. Certainly within the city, we don't have, we've sort of developed all of our spaces, but it's harder to work across the river. Even though, we're more connected to East Dubuque, Illinois and Southwest Wisconsin, it would be easier for us to do a project with Western Iowa than it would be to work across that little gap for funding sources. I'm not saying that physically it's harder. So yeah, I don't have a very great answer for wetlands. I think it's a huge part of the solution, and it's really hard because of the development that's already occurred in areas that should be restored to wetlands.
I don't know how close, Gina, this is to Dubuque. I confess I don't have a map right in front of me, but there is a proposal. I think it's in Clayton County, the Bloody Run Creek. Is Bloody Run Creek in your watershed area, or is it north?
I don't think so. I think it is it north or south?
It's by Monona and Postville and yeah,
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. A lot of us have been following that proposal to house 11,000 beef animals in a confined feed operation where the manure will flow right into Bloody Run Creek. What kind of agricultural runoff issues in terms of livestock do you have in your county beyond nitrates, nitrogen, and phosphorus runoff?
I would say those are the 2 big ones. I mean, any isn't great, but those are the 2 that we're consistently finding in the water. And there are, I don't know, maybe the other Dubuquers on here can say there aren't a ton of confined feeding operations within the county.
What about dairy? Not further north still? Okay.
I don't think the super large ones. There's certainly
Okay.
dairy in the county, but I don't think they're, maybe, I don't know.
I don't know how many there are either, but I think our Board of Supervisors did sign on to not a moratorium on new CAFOs being developed, or at least they have to meet the master matrix, and our Board of Supervisors is concerned, but they have limits.
You can meet the master matrix with your eyes closed. So that's a worthless document. Another question maybe in the chat. I guess I answered Pam's question. Okay. So moving forward, Gina, I'm curious about what you see in terms of, clearly in our state, Dubuque's been the leader. What do you see? Is there any progress? I know the mayor of Des Moines County is very much wanting to make Des Moines a sustainable city. I think that's going to take several years. But what do you see happening along the upper Mississippi watershed in terms of your kind of community effort? Are you hopeful? Is it still not in everybody's radar? What's your feeling?
It depends on the day, quite honestly. Some days I feel more hopeful than others. I will say that moving back here, like I think I left Dubuque in my late teens as an environmentalist. And when I came back, I was shocked that while Dubuque had done an amazing job at reinventing itself and doing a lot of sustainability efforts, I was shocked that still there's a general attitude of sort of more capitalistic, I am man in control of the environment, instead of a respect and sort of desire to protect the environment. And so I don't know how you change a culture. Like the culture shift part is always where I get my least hopeful. But I think that there are pockets of really passionate people, not only in Dubuque, but all along the Mississippi watershed. And I think more and more people, as mainstream media is covering climate impacts across the world, are coming to realize like, oh, maybe my individual choice does matter in the grand scheme of things. And that, even though I hate to see, the world on fire and flooding and drought and hunger, if that's what it's going to take to get people to shift and say, oh, I have to care about this. I have to consider my consumerism choices. I have to consider my lifestyle choices. Then so be it, I guess. And that's sort of where I get my hope. And I get lots of interest from high school and college students about the work and how they can get involved. And that's also really hopeful. Because when I talk to like my dad, I feel less hopeful. But so I think the young people are going to save us once again, and there's just a different respect for the environment in terms of like a whole generation coming up than the rest of us.
I don't know if it's possible. Can you go back and screen share your slides? There was one that you had early on that referred to transportation, buildings, and landfills or something. And I did have just some interest in that particular slide and into what it represented. Okay, there, thank you. So reduction share by sector, share of total 2030, and you had 13%. I'm trying to see, is that solid waste on that circle graph? And 28% looks like transportation, and then 59%, which I thought was buildings, but then lower down you have like a cumulative 26% buildings. So what's the difference between the circle graph and the bottom bar graph?
Yeah,
share of potential cost sectors.
The circle is including what we've already, it would be the bar graph as well as what reductions have already occurred. So this is saying from this point forward, the bar graph is saying we still need to hit 50% reduction in buildings and energy. Does that make sense?
Well, okay, so a big gain was made, it looks to me, by buildings, like infrastructure, right? Initially, in other words, you've got the low-hanging fruit at the beginning, right? In that circle graph. Is that what it's saying?
Yeah,
59%?
and a lot of that was grid improvements by the energy company, which is why it's so large.
Okay, okay. And moving forward then at the bottom, that's sort of moving forward beyond what we've already achieved. Is that what I'm reading?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. So the reason I ask is I'm going to bring forward to one of our future programs, a new software program called En-ROADS. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it does kind of a graphic look at where we can make the most impact toward climate change positively. And if I'm reading this right, transportation and land use would be the next biggest chunk you could focus on. Am I interpreting that correctly?
After buildings and energy?
Yes.
Yeah.
At the bottom bar graph, kind of, at the
Yeah.
bottom of the screen. And so land use in an agricultural state is probably a harder nut to crack, right? Because we, rather than thinking we're just stewards of the land, we think in a mindset, well, I own it. I can do whatever I want. And that what I have found is that that's the one really hard thing to change in an agricultural state. You mentioned earlier that we cut down all the trees. And so I think land use and the way we think about our land, to me, is got to be one of the critical pieces moving forward. Other comments, questions, observations from the group? Is way too quiet. Do you all need another cup of coffee?
A question.
Go ahead, Kathy. Glad to see you here.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be here. Gina, where does your local drinking water come from? Is it?
It's wells.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's individual wells. There's no aquifers that the city's drawing from or anything like that.
Does it come from the Jordan? Are they that deep?
I know they're very
Actually, the Jordan's pretty shallow by you.
Right now, yeah. Okay. I was just curious about the concern for water quality for drinking. And one of the things that comes up is there enough time being spent doing testing for wells, that type of thing to keep safe water. So.
Yeah, in my opinion, we treat drinking water in Dubuque as just like a infinite resource. And I think it's going to come back to bite us for sure, especially considering all of the other poisons we're putting in the earth. And so it has to go somewhere, right? And so it's on my list of concerns, but it's not an immediate concern in the city right now.
The good thing is you're not drawing from the Mississippi for your drinking water. For a long time in Iowa City, we were drawing from the Iowa River, and that was a bad thing. So good.
Well, just like Des Moines is drawing from the Raccoon in Des Moines. I don't know if this will show, but this is the Jordan Aquifer in Iowa. And if I look at it, it looks to me like Dubuque may not be sitting on it. I'm not really sure, Gina. It's hard to tell from this map, but it looks like it hits the very northeast corner of the state, but I don't know how wide it is. But a lot of the concerns we have in Ummer, in addition to water quality, is more recently water quantity and the threat to droughts present. And also that, as we've seen with some of the energy companies, particularly fracking companies, where they not only want our sand, they also want our water. And how do you see that impacting the city of Dubuque and the surrounding areas in terms of future access to water? Because Kathy's question, I think, speaks to that in terms of, okay, we've got water now, but look what happened in Des Moines. The cost of cleaning up the river water is so high they are now going to spend millions of dollars drilling wells. And so climate change is impacting water quantity. What do you see in the future? Crystal ball.
This is an unpopular opinion, but I mean, I think it's a valid concern. And we, as I mentioned, you know, we don't treat it that way. And we continue to incentivize large water users moving to the city and giving them very cheap water rates. We have massive water users, industrial water users that are paying a lower rate than low-income households are. And so we really need to right-size our rates in terms of water, as well as consider like maybe using a bunch of water you shouldn't be like incentivized for using a bunch of water.
It's a real direct subsidy.
Yeah, yeah. And
I don't think a lot of just residents see that. I don't think they even know it, that there is that kind of subsidy going to businesses.
It's come to light due to water shutoffs during COVID, and the city suspended water shutoffs, but we recently announced that we're going to start shutting off water again, but we're simultaneously looking at our fines and our fees and what does it mean? Are we sending people into a tailspin of poverty by shutting off their water and then they have to pay to get it back on? And why are we charging them a higher rate per gallon than we are other folks? And I'm not saying it's going to change anytime soon. I'm grateful that we're considering it, and it's certainly led by our commitment to equity. But I mean, we just had a ribbon cutting for a Simmons pet food company, and they are going to use a ton of water and pay very little money for it. And right now it seems very abundant, and I want people to be considering, you know, what is the short-term financial gain for a few, or the long-term loss for many, and what does that look like? And I'm always that person in the meeting that's saying that. It's not very popular.
Gina, do you know of anybody doing any kind of research on those costs? I mean, I'm thinking of Chris Jones down at the Iowa Water Center, who's a pretty sharp guy and looks at, I mean, he's a numbers cruncher. Are you aware of anybody that's actually counting or looking at how valuable those subsidies are? I mean, anybody doing a look at that?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know.
Okay. Well, it certainly seems to me, I'll ask Chris about it. It just seems to me like somebody ought to. You know, I'm sure that economic development people don't want us to do that because that's a giveaway when we want to attract a company. But long term, it seems to me like this is an issue that we just can't afford to keep, you know, saying, well, ignore that, we'll keep doing that. Well, that's something to think about. Jerry McKinley brought up to us that our 3 areas of focus need to be expanded, not just water quality, but water quantity and access. So it's maybe something we can look at moving forward. I really appreciated this. Tam, thank you for bringing Gina to us and showing us, I think, something positive that's happening in terms of the issues we're focused on in the Upper Mississippi River Region watershed. I'll give everyone kind of a last chance to comment. People we haven't heard from. Mary and Steve, you're being pretty quiet there. I don't see Steve, but you have to unmute, Mary. Okay, Mary's on mute. Okay. Nancy Hill, any thoughts to share?
No, I apologize again. Every time I seem to try and pull in a little more current here, I lose my internet. But Gia, thank you so much for coming back to Iowa. I mean, I just wrote in chat about education being so important, and how do we spread the word to everyone without having organizations such as we and people such as you work for the cause, because it's a big one and important. Thank you.
Others? Lee, Paula?
I'm well into the sustainability thing, and I think any organization, a city especially, that looks into sustainability, you're ultimately going to trip over all these things that we're saying that maybe Gina doesn't have a lot of a lot of information right now on what's going on, but certainly water quantity is going to have to be something that you look at, and also the quality of that water supply. So keep up the good work, Gina. Keep your eyes open and listen. Thank you. Thank you for coming by.
Thank you, Lee. Lee's one of our Illinois board members. Any other last thoughts? Carolyn?
Well, I was interested in what they're doing there, and kudos to everything there, Gina. And then the other thing I was thinking about is Europe has done, the European Union has done quite extensive economic research on the impact of PFAS and what it takes to get PFAS out of the water and what it takes to decontaminate water that's already contaminated. And I think we should be looking at that kind of model because it's exorbitant. And, if we can't have accountability to the companies that are contaminating the water, all of our communities are going to be in big trouble. And it's just overwhelming. And I think if we looked at what it costs to clean up our water sources, especially at that big a scale that they're going to find all over the United States, everybody is going to be chagrined. It's just going to be bad.
Carolyn and Jerry are both from Wisconsin, and they're spearheading an effort for our October program, Gina, which will focus on PFAS. So a question for you is, I think we asked this earlier among ourselves, is Iowa have a system to test public drinking water for PFAS?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that was a question we had earlier in our discussion, and we'll learn more about that at our October meeting. I know that Iowa's fortunate in one sense that we do not have a major military base. However, we do have a munitions plant in the southeast corner of the state, but PFAS were rampant on our military bases. So any state that has those, and along with major airports, which every state has, are prone to having those in the environment. But it's a rising concern for this group and a lot of other groups about water quality. And are we measuring them? We don't know. Last thoughts before we let Gina go? Just a reminder, go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, I guess I'd just like to say, Gina, congratulations to Dubuque for holding on to your economic status. That, at that point you can get into your metropolitan status, gives you the ability to pull on to economic impacts monies and grants and so forth. So I think that was huge when that came across. So I think that's a good thing for grants.
Well, it's always encouraging to see a young Iowan who comes back home. And as far as I'm concerned, anyone under 60 is pretty young. But I think Dubuque is a wonderful place that will attract younger people because of its emphasis on environment and sustainability. I think it's a huge asset, and it should encourage all communities to look at moving in that direction if they want to attract growth, both in population and in economies. So that's, you're kind of our big flagship out there so much, on our eastern seaboard, that we can point to a success story, because frankly, looking over the landscape of central Iowa and the watershed in the Des Moines lobe and the issues we have with water quality all over the state can be overwhelmingly depressing. And so it's wonderful to at least point to some success.
Hey, any castle that has a huge wall around it and a large moat is terminable.
Well, again, Gina and Tam, thank you so much for putting this together. And a reminder for Gina, but for all of us, that this was recorded, and Gretchen will put the recording up on our website at some point. And so urge your local leagues or any organization, Gina, feel free to share that recording far and wide. The primary focus on the Upper Mississippi River Region ILO is education, in addition to advocacy. But our primary emphasis with these programs is to educate as many people as we can about the issues surrounding our water quality and quantity issues in the Upper Mississippi River region. So help us spread the word. Each of you, let your local leagues know that this recording will be available for a local program, and encourage people to use it. I want to go back and see it again because you went through your slides so fast. I really wanted to take a longer look at those. And I particularly enjoy the maps. And I think I said something to you, Gretchen, in the chat. There's a wonderful map, and I don't know where I saw it, and maybe it's on our website, that shows all of the different manifestations of the Mississippi River since time. And it's a multicolored. I just think that is, we should make a poster and sell it. I mean, it's just a remarkable map of the river, and think about that. But if it's not on our website, Gretchen, try to find that and put it out there. But you showed one similar, Gina, very briefly, again, with those different color zones. But the other thing that I like about all this work that we're doing in terms of what we're teaching ourselves, and Gina said it earlier, you can't stop the water. Water will have its way. And I think towns like Dubuque and cities, particularly, where they finally decided, building walls and levees wasn't going to be the whole answer. At times you have to let the water have room. And so that map is just, to me, fascinating, and another way to help tell our story. So again, thank you all for such a great program. And we will be back again in months for our wonderful PFAS program. Go ahead, Gina.
Can I say just two things? So one, if you all want to travel to Dubuque, I want to invite you to the Growing Sustainable Communities Conference. It's October 12th and 13th. And you can go to our website, which is www.gsc, Growing Sustainable Communities, Dubuque.com. And the rates are on there, and the agenda is on there. And the day before is a watershed symposium that Soil and Water Conservation is putting on as sort of a pre-conference, and it's all really affordable. And so just so that it's on your radar, it seems like some of you might be interested in that. And then the other thing is, for the Dubuque folks on this call, I might be reaching out. We are doing, I wrote a grant, this is my long game, but I wrote a grant to do a civic leadership program for the city. And so we're going to be sort of training people how to be civic leaders, and encouraging them to run for council and school boards and elected positions. And obviously it's nonpartisan, but I might be reaching out to you for some guidance or for some content that I think you could help with the idea that we will elect future climate leaders of the real long game. But thank you for this opportunity. This has been lovely.
Well, and do reach out to Mary Ray Bragg, who was one of the original board members on 50/50 in 2020 to elect more women, a nonpartisan effort to elect to the office. But she's in your community and knows all that history and all contact the people that can help you train those people. But we were focused just on women. But
That's
great.
fine.
I'm glad to hear you're doing that. Yeah. Help me out. October 12th through 14th is the conference?
It's the 12th and 13th.
13th. Okay. And is it
11th is the Watershed Symposium.
okay? It might be good if you could send Gretchen that link, and she could share it with all of us. Is it only in person? Is any of it virtual?
None of it is virtual.
Okay.
I say this knocking on wood as we're like, what are we going to do if things keep moving in the direction that they're going? But
sounds like a great opportunity. I'd love to come. Tam, last words.
I think I've been to some of those symposiums before, and they're fabulous. They really are. So I would recommend anyone to come.
Great. Okay. Thanks again, Gina.
Thank
Keep the
you.
good work up, and we're just thrilled to have you in Iowa. And thank you all for attending, and watch for the announcement when the recording goes on the website. And thank you, Gretchen, for all your good work managing our virtual community. Job well done.
Thank you, Gina.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, all. Stay cool.
Yep, you too.